Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor have now been detained in China for more than 2 years. They were accused of espionage, charges widely seen as retribution for Canada's arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. In the time since, Canada has coordinated with allies and called for their immediate release. Here's part 2 of my interview with Minister of Foreign Affairs François-Philippe Champagne. It's now been 2 years without progress to free them from that detainment. Does that necessitate a look at your government's approach to this? Should that approach change?
Well, I would say 2 years that have been stolen from Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Let's speak truth now. 2 years that have been stolen from their families, from their loved ones. And you know, I don't think there's an alternative to diplomacy. I mean, if you know one, let me know, Vashi. But I think what we've been able to do in 2020 is that the world now, and I would say a number of democracies around the world are seized of the case of the Michaels. I've said many times that what we have achieved is that they're not seen as two Canadians being arbitrarily detained or facing coercive diplomacy. They are two citizens of a democracy. And we have been gathering a number of countries around the world. And I can tell, when I speak to my counterparts around the world, everyone knows about the case of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. So I think that the way to address that is to continue to put pressure, to be firm at every step of the way, and smart in our engagement, to gather the international community as we've done. And I will just point, if you saw, for example, when there was the EU-China summit, the case of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor was raised at that. So we have been able to gather the international community and say, let's speak with one voice. Let's send a very clear message to China that this type of coercive diplomacy, that arbitrary detention, is not acceptable, and we're going to be talking about it at every step of the way, and I've done that throughout the year, and we'll continue to do that until we bring them back home.
Why hasn't it worked?
Because diplomacy takes time. And I would say that today, if you look at where we were and where we are today, when I caused the meeting with my counterpart in Rome, 2 hours meeting, something that in diplomacy you don't see very often, particularly when you meet a counterpart like the Chinese foreign minister. But from that meeting, we've been working hard to get, for example, consular access, restore consular access, which you know we have not been able to ascertain the well-being of Michael Kovrig and Spavor. And that's something that China is committed to under the Vienna Convention. And since then, we have been able to make progress on that. As you know, Ambassador Barton has been able to have on-site virtual visits, you know, in a sense. He's in the facility, but it's done through a camera because of the health and safety protocol they've put in place. But I think this was a step forward in the right direction. We're going to be working with our allies around the world to continue to push for their release. And at every step of the way, reminding China. And I can tell you the fact that the world is talking about Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor systematically in their engagement with China is making a difference.
Does Canada, though, have to rely so much so on pressure from other countries? There are other levers, and I take your point around diplomacy. I'm not saying that the alternative is to declare war, for example, but there are other levers at your disposal that other jurisdictions have used. I'm thinking, for example, of sanctions. And we're not just talking about the Michaels here, we're talking about major human rights infringements where the Uyghurs are concerned, where Hong Kong is concerned. As I said, other jurisdictions have employed the use of sanctions. Will you?
Well, I would say my view on sanction is that they have maximum impact when you go with a core group of countries. And we've done that. We've done that with respect to Belarus. We've done that in the case of Navalny in Russia. And when you look at and what we've done during the year, if you look, Vashi, specifically on Hong Kong, we've been working with our partners of the Five Eyes. We were the first one to suspend the extradition treaty. Other colleagues have joined force. So my point when it comes to that is that the impact that you want to have is working together with our allies and partners around the world. That's what we've been doing. And that's why when I say, when I hear the issue of sanctions, we're working with the international community. We're working with our partners. We've done it. And we will continue to press as we've done with respect to Hong Kong. I think Canada has been part of about all the statements that have been done either by the G7 or the Five Eyes. Actually, some of them were at the initiative of Canada. Because, for example, in Hong Kong, we have a vested interest with 300,000 Canadians.
Yeah,
so my point is that the way to confront these challenges and this is not unique to Canada. I can speak of the case of Australia where we're talking together. I can speak of Hong Kong where we're talking with the United Kingdom. Is that what we're doing now? What you see democracies doing today is that when you're confronted with challenges like that, the answer is to work together, to speak together and to stand up. And certainly Canada has been standing up with respect to the Uyghur, with respect to Hong Kong, and certainly with respect to Michael Kovrig.
But thus far, within that group of allies as well, I mean, I take your point that something happening in concert is certainly more powerful, but I'm asking on behalf of Canadian viewers to the Canadian government. Sure. At what point, after we see the horrors described at, so-called concentration camps for Uyghurs, or the complete destruction of democracy in Hong Kong, at what point does Canada say, that's it, it's time to employ sanctions? Because you're describing, I understand, a process whereby you work with allies, but you're not telling Canadians when enough is enough when it comes to China.
Well, I think we've said it many times, enough is enough. Think about Hong Kong.
But saying is different than acting.
Well, I would say acting, suspending the extradition treaty, we were the first country in the world to do that. That's a pretty big action to take, to suspend the extradition treaty, to say that we will not sell, we will not transfer any more sensitive material, that will suspend all the export, that we will put immigration measures specifically for Hong Kong. I mean, how many countries have done that in the world? 3, with respect to Hong Kong that I know of. So we've not been just talking, we've been acting significantly. I mean, those are significant actions in light of that. When you talk about the Uyghur for a minute, the Uyghur, we've said we're deeply concerned. I saw the report, for example, on the BBC today where we saw a new image. So what did we do? So we took that, and at the time, at every step of the way, I've been talking both privately and publicly into saying we are extremely concerned about that. Now you would say, what have you done? Then I met with Michelle Bachelet, the High Representative of Human Rights of the United Nations. I said, Michelle, how can we help you to get access and unfettered access to the site so that you can report to the world? How can Canada be helpful to you? We spoke about that twice already.
Are you waiting for the UN to come to conduct an investigation before you can conclude,
like
for example, around genocide?
I would like the UN to be able to have access and to report back, because that's an issue that the international community needs to be seized. And certainly
there was a committee, though, here in Canada who studied it at length and determined that genocide was happening based on the evidence they heard.
But I think, and I like the work of the committee, by the way, and other committees, parliamentarians around the world are doing that. But I think in a question like that, you want a body, for example, like the UN, to report back to the international community. And not only we did that, but we acted, because you talk about action, and for Canadians to understand that is important. We acted with 38 countries at the United Nations to sign a declaration and to call specifically for having unfettered access so that they can report back to the UN. 38 countries in the world, and Canada was among those who called for that. So those are beyond words. I agree with you that statement is something. When you look at the toolbox of diplomacy in the 21st century, you can say, yeah, you do statements, but I'd like to do actions. And these actions, I would think, speak louder than words, because we took significant actions in light of the challenges that we were confronted with.
But those human rights infringements are still happening to the Uyghurs. What's happening in Hong Kong has actually escalated over the last number of months since you took those actions that you detailed. So I'm still not clear at what point you determine there needs to be more punitive measures taken, or are you hesitant to do so because of the impact it could have on the relationship?
No.
That's what your critics charge, right? That you are not willing to stand up to China because you're too afraid of what the consequences will be.
No, I think, but when you take actions, you have to look at the impact. What I'm saying is that if you're going to take sanctions, look at the countries who have taken sanctions. They've taken them together. So what we're doing within the Five Eyes, so with Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, the United States, or whether it's the G7, and we've done that. We've done that with respect to Belarus when we've acted with the European Union. Or,
but Belarus is not China.
No, but I'm saying for sanctions to have impact, you need to act for maximum impact. You need to work with a core group of countries. And that's what we've been saying, is that Canada has been at the forefront of these discussions with our allies to say, what are we going to do in light of these circumstances and these facts? How are we going to be reacting? And those discussions are live. But what I'm saying is that if you're going to do that, I think that you have to look at the impact of what you're proposing to do. And is that going to be conducive to change? And therefore, what you need to do, and I believe that when you apply sanctions, you need to do that with the international community. And that's what we've been doing, and that's what we'll continue to do with our colleagues around the world.
Is there a chance that happens sooner rather than later, given those conversations
There's
you
a lot of
referenced?
conversations, and there's many things that are being considered by our allies and partners around the world. We'll certainly have a discussion. I mean, what I just want to say to Canadians who are watching, what we're facing in Canada with respect to our relationship with China is not unique to Canada. I mean, this is the same thing that my colleagues have in Europe.
It's not, but it feels unique because of the situation, I think,
clearly,
of Michael
with
Kovrig
Michael
and Michael
Kovrig, and
Spavor.
that's what makes us at the forefront of the answer. But if you look at the broader challenges that you referred to, that's the same discussion that you have in Europe. That's the same discussion that colleagues have in Asia Pacific. That's the same discussion we had with our partners in the United States. So my point is that the uniqueness for us is Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. That's why we've been at the forefront of them and making sure they come back home. But the challenge is as to what's the best way to respond, for example, to coercive diplomacy and arbitrary detention. Obviously, that's something which all my colleagues in democracies around the world, we talk about these things, and we're looking at ways, and we'll be talking with the new administration as well. And I think many would tell you, Vashi, that the way to face that is to work together. And what we have achieved is that the issue of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor is not only a bilateral issue, now it's a multilateral issue, and I think it gives weight to the voice because we're speaking with one voice to ask for
And
the
like
release.
I said, I'm not trying to take away from that, but I think that Canadians also observe that they've been detained for 2 years under pretty awful conditions and are worried about how, on the face of it, there has not been a lot of progress, at least where they're free. And on that note, I do want to ask, because when you came into office, you promised a new framework guiding Canada's policy towards China by the end of this year. Where is that framework?
Well, it's an action. I mean, you've seen it in our deeds and in our words. In a sense, what I said at the beginning is that China of 2020 is not China of 2018. It's not China of 2016. So the framework that we had, and what I said is we've put it in action this year. So we need to be firm and smart. We need to be defending our interests, defending our values and our principles, including human rights. We've done that with respect to the Uyghur and when it comes to Hong Kong.
But will there be an actual framework presented?
Well,
because Canadians can't access that anywhere, right?
No, but I think people have seen us acting and responding to what has been, because it's an evolving situation. I can tell you that colleagues around the world are saying what they were, the posture that they had even at the beginning of the year is not the same as this time of the year. So we need to evolve because China is evolving and in some respect needs us to be nimble in how we respond to that. And that's what I would say.
Does that mean, though, there won't be something released? Because that's the way that you framed it a year ago,
Yeah,
that there
well,
would be something presented to Canadians.
When it's the right time, we'll come back to Canadians. But what I'm saying is that at the way we're doing now is that you see the foreign policy in action. The position we've been taking on Hong Kong, the one we've been taking with respect to the Uyghur. But in concept, I think people who are watching understand, what is this about? You defend your interests, you defend your values and your principles, which in our case includes human rights, and you insist that in this case China respect its international obligations, and you do that in partnership with allies around the world.
Let me ask, okay, I understand what you're saying, I think, and this will just be my final question. I think the reason I ask for, you say that when the time is right, the reason I ask for a framework is, and you're well aware of this, the opposition charges that your policy towards China is incoherent. There was recently an article in the Globe and Mail which seemed to underscore that argument, right? It showed that the military had a certain posture when it came to joint exercises with the Chinese military in this country, and that there was a lot of pushback from your department about that. They didn't want disengagement when it came to China. And this was a few months after Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor were detained. They didn't want to reduce the bilateral interactions or relationships in any capacity. How are Canadians supposed to square that one arm of the Canadian government says we shouldn't be increasing our engagement or maintaining our engagement with China, while another arm says don't do anything to anger China? Are you more worried about China's reactions than you are about Canadians? How do you
But let's put that in context of time. Now we're referring things which date back at best 2 years ago, or 3 years ago.
Yeah, to the beginning of 2019.
And the point is that what I kept saying at the beginning, and I think people who are watching understand, China of 2020, not China of 2018, not China of 2016, And even some of colleagues in Europe would say that the framework they've put at the beginning of this year is not anymore accurate because things are evolving so quickly when it comes to China. So my point to that, what you were referring to was discussion between officials, which date back years. Clearly, the posture of Canada has changed since then.
But Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor had already been detained.
And that was at the time. And like I said, our view and our posture has been changing because now you're talking.
So you wouldn't have pushed back today like there was pushback then? Not you, I know it was somebody else.
But I would say we would never
thing.
consider that today to do what was done. But my point is that we always have to put that in time because you could refer back that the previous government has signed also a joint exercise agreement or some framework. You would never do that today. I think people understand that. So the picture you have today, you have to look with the facts and circumstances that you're facing today. And clearly, this evolution in the policy that you're saying, you've seen Canada standing up, speaking up at every step of the way. I can tell over the last few years, in light of what China has been changing in terms of its coercive diplomacy and arbitrary detention. And you've seen that, and I want Canadians to understand, it's not unique to Canada. It's not unique. You look at what happened in the United Kingdom, look at what happened in Europe, look what's happening in Australia. I mean, this is not unique to Canada now. What is unique for us is obviously that we are all concerned as Canadians and as parliamentarians is to bring Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor back home, certainly, because we have been facing what coercive diplomacy looks like by stealing 2 years of life from 2 Canadians who should never have been put in jail in the first place and have inflicted enormous harm to their families. And I spoke to them just last week. And if you see the motivation and the energy I put behind is because I know that I'm fighting for them. And I know that the family rely on me and the Prime Minister and our government to fight at every step of the way. And what you've seen in 2020, you bet whether it comes to fight for the family of PS 752 or for the family of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, we'll be there at every step of the way.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it there. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.